So what we're going to do today is we're going to follow up a video that I had made some time back where I demonstrated the TX16S here with the OpenTX operating system and a glider operating about 6 channels, I think. 6 or 7 channels to show how some of the mixes that I put together looked like. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to assemble this other glider. This is a GT2000 made by Dual Sky, and I've had it for a while now. It's been it's a proven flyer. It's a really good glider. It's a light glider. It's not necessarily a competition glider or anything like that, but it flies really well, and it's a good plane to practice thermaling and other things, but essentially has the same controls as an competition F5J glider would have anyway. So it's a good way to practice, or it's a good way to get something that's as similar, as close as the F5J as possible. Anyway, so let's assemble the wings real quickly here, and we'll be able to take a look at how it operates. Okay, and I'll go ahead and turn the transmitter on. So the big difference here between then and now is that now I have
Welcome to EdgeTX.
EdgeTX as the operating system for this system. I recently upgraded it, and to be honest with you, I think it's the best thing I've ever done, because it finally has, I think, all the functionality I was expecting to get out of this radio. I mean, the functionality in general was already there, except touch screen and things of that nature, which really make a difference. Anyway, well, as I turn this on, and you can see some warnings that come up because I've set it up to do that. First thing that I come across is the checklist that I've assembled for this, which I have pretty much for all models, and every time I turn this thing on, I end up with a checklist that tells me or reminds me what functions I have set up for that model on this radio. And like I said, it's touchscreen, so you can literally between pushing buttons and touching the screen, you can move around. For example, if I were to just touch the screen right now, I come up with a menu and it gives me the option to select a bunch of things here. I'm not getting into that probably later, but more importantly right now, what I want to do is just basically show the operation of this system using EdgeTX on a TX16S on this particular model. Very basic, just to show the mixing and how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the receiver on, and it's going to make a few beeps here and there.
Throttle is off.
I want to make sure the throttle is off so I don't get hit by the propeller. I'm going to close the canopy just to make it a little easier to work. By the way, this is a replacement canopy I remade. It's not the best possible workmanship on this, but I had to come up with something quick to replace the canopy that was there that I lost after an accident or a crash, and it just flew away. Couldn't find it, and it's a fiberglass painted right now canopy. So anyway, essentially over here, what we have right now, one of the first things I want to do is actually reset the telemetry so that all the telemetry is back to 0, to make sure that it's back to 0. So the altimeter is marking 0, or the variometer is marking 0, and so on and so forth. That's what that does. Right now you can see the battery is charged to 7.9. And I have a couple of views that I can, again, with the finger move around with, which is really fantastic. For example, I have a few, a full view of all the different, outputs that the radio will put out. So essentially, channel 1 is aileron right, channel 2 is elevator, channel 3 is aileron left, channel 4 is rudder, channel 5 is flap left, and channel 6 is flap right, and finally channel 7 is throttle. So I got 7 channels that I'm utilizing right now for this. So anyway, so if I were to right now, also another thing that I've used pretty well in this model is I've used the 6-way switch here to give me the ability to select or filter on modes. So I have basically the default mode, which is 1. As soon as you turn it on, it comes onto that. And it's a mode that's pretty much, you can fly fairly, I mean, you can do anything. I mean, you can fly the whole function or the whole functionality is there, except you don't have you know, specific flaps that I need for different things, right? So, but otherwise, you know, it's kind of the default mode. For example, if I go to the second switch option here,
Launch mode.
it'll get me into launch mode, and what that means is that I'll end up with you know, the ability to crank up the propeller, the engine, whatever, and the flaps are going to go down basically 1 notch. Actually, they're going to go on reflex, so they're going to go a little negative, you know, by very little. And the reason is because you want to, when you're cranking the propeller, what's happening is you end up creating, you know, thrust, and there's an upward tendency, or, you know, because you're putting so much energy into this thing, you tend to go up. So what you want to do is counteract it a little bit. You want to make sure it's a flat takeoff, which without going up, the nose up, and you want to neutralize a little bit the tendency of the plane to nose up anyway, and also you want to neutralize the tendency of the plane to turn, you know, left because of torque and P factor and all that. If you guys understand about planes, you know, there's always going to be the tendency to roll left. So also then what happens, another thing that's embedded into this mode, this takeoff mode, if you will, launch mode, is negative elevator. A few degrees of negative elevator will help me compensate for that extra power. I also have a curve that doesn't allow the power of the motor to go beyond a certain percentage, because I don't need that much power. I just need enough power. This power, I mean, the motor that this particular glider has right now is a little too powerful, and I just don't need it. So if we move commands around, let's see what happens here. So if you can see the movement of this is aileron right and no left, just that's all I'm doing, with no flap setting or anything. It's pretty much neutral there. And elevator up and down, rudder left and right. Now, one thing I do have to is in order to do to be able to do turns, balance turns or control turns and so on. What I have is a mix of rudder and aileron, which when I turn the ailerons one way or the other, have movement on the rudder as well. So that allows me to do proper turns. Going back to the movement, right? So there's the flaps and so on. So because I'm in mode 2, that's my takeoff mode or launch mode. If I, you know, and again, this switch is the one that controls the flap. So I have 2 positions on this, 2 flap positions on this. So it's a 3-position switch. So flap position 1.
Flap position 1.
And if you did notice, there's a little bit of an increase this way, or in other words, a negative flap, or positive flap rather, which basically creates negative lift to the airfoil a little bit, flattens out the concaveness of the airfoil. So anyway, so it's more like straightening out the airfoil a little bit from what it's normally. And I got a second notch of flaps.
Flap position 2.
Which basically increases that same idea. And then again, the idea is to make sure that you have a flat airfoil that allows you to go straight. Meanwhile, while I'm doing that, though, there's a little bit of a negative. It's almost it's hard to show it there unless I put the camera right on it. But there's going to be a negative, you know, elevator as I put that in motion, and that just again compensates, so I don't have to be pushing the elevator down as I take off. allows me to just basically crank this at about 50% or 60% of throttle, and even with 60% of throttle, I got plenty of power, or more if I want to, but it just keeps you going straight. So
Flap position 0, flap position 1, flap position 2.
but basically, if I throttle through the engine, you can see that the elevator goes down a little bit. That's the elevator. What I'm talking about, the elevator. The more throttle I put in, the more elevator down I get, and it's extremely nice to be able to do that. So that's launch mode. We have here. Another thing that I do have is standard in all models is dual rates, which I don't use really on this one. On some other planes, depending on the type of plane it is, I'll play with, with a lower rates, more forgiving rates. But this is the rate button. So I can go to. I have basically 3 settings. One is 0, nothing, no change. I mean, directly from the stick. Mid rates in this case might be like 70%, and or 80%, and then 60% maybe for low rates. But I think in this case it's 50% and 70% and 0 and 100%. 100% is full movement, right? So I guess I can show it on the ailerons. So if I go to mid rates, it's a little bit less, and low rates is a lot less, and then back to high rates. And I can explain how where I put that on the system too. I typically want to put those things on the input, screen. The other thing too is I have is a couple more things. I mean, actually, this is the receiver in here as a dual. I mean, what is it? A FrSky GRX80, GRX8. Which has telemetry in it, and vario and altimeter and all that. So if I wanted to set that up or have it display or talk, I just need to switch this little. So this will sing as it goes into a thermal or increases in altitude. It'll have a high-pitched sound, and if I go and go down or low, lose altitude, it'll go into a more lower tone, and ultimately, if I stay at level, it won't make any noise. And also, I can flip one more time, and it'll give me the current altitude.
3.8 feet.
Now we're above the ground, so that's why it's giving me 3-point-something feet of altitude. Anyway, so that's some of the things it can do.
Snap flap on, snap flap off.
And if I don't want any of that, I can turn it off. Now, another thing that you just heard is a snap flap. Snap flap is also something that I have. So, for example, if I have right now no snap flap basically what it does is allows you to get extra up or down on the flaps versus the elevator, so that you literally, roll or pitch up or pitch down much quicker. It's very useful when you're trying to, for example, trap or get into a thermal that's small and you need to rotate fairly quickly, or even when you do a turn around to get around to find the thermal or to get on a thermal, to hook a thermal, and you want to do it fairly quickly and make sure you don't lose any altitude. So that helps that quickness of turn or turning. So if I, right now again, up and down, you see just the elevator move. But if I put the snap flap on, you're going to see the flaps move opposite to the elevator to provide the effect. So up elevator, down elevator. So when I say up elevator, the flaps go down. When I say down elevator, the flaps go up. Opposite to, and it's actually flaps and ailerons, because I always have these things matched, so it's a continuous all-wing help. The whole wing participates in this. Okay, another mode is mode 3, which is basically the thermal mode. And thermal mode, what you get here basically is the flaps going down a little bit. So negative flap, so you can produce more concaveness on the airfoil. And it's, again, the whole wing does that. The ailerons move down a little bit as well and participate in that. to provide a little bit more lift. And it's very little. I mean, the first notch of flaps is just basically there. And you know, if you're looking for thermals, I mean, that sometimes it's really helpful. And then if I put another notch of flaps, it just goes down just a slight bit more. And we're talking about, you know, 3% to 5% flaps or something like that, which is really little.
Flap position 0.
And you can go back and forth depending on what you're doing there. If you got a windy day, sometimes you don't want, or a cold day. I don't know. If if you need to move between places, you would want to bring the flaps to 0. But if you're thermaling, you're hunting for thermals, you want to be at least in thermal mode 1, and again, you're obviously doing the right turns and all those things. The next mode is
Speed mode.
it's a mode that's basically made to be able to move fast. And I don't use it much, but if for whatever reason I'm hunting thermals and I want to move or cruise from one thermal to another, or I'm at high altitude and I have the ability to do that without really losing much, I'm not going to lose too much altitude in doing it, because what happens here is that this is basically just like when I was explaining the launch mode, this is reflex flap, so it's positive flap, so flaps go up. So if you see it, flap position 1 and position 2, they come up a little bit, and that's to make this thing fly, or neutralize a little bit the effect of the airfoil. And again, it applies to the ailerons and the flap. They'll move up a little bit, enough to, again, make the airfoil a little bit more flat, so it can go faster and not have so much drag, or have less drag and less lift too. So you tend to lose altitude when you do that. But you can go straight and faster. That's kind of the theory behind it. In practical terms, again, I don't use it all that much, but I do use it, and when I use it, you can see that you're able to go a little faster. So like if, for example, you're far and you want to come back and you're very high, you might want to put that on, and you can cruise back fairly quickly. I mean, it's not like it's going to come back like a rocket or anything like that, but I mean, you're soaring, so you're going to be coming back slow but faster than normal. And ultimately, the last setting is for landing.
Landing mode.
And what this allows you is to basically just have a higher level of down flaps. And again, the ailerons also participate in this. So flap position 1 is pretty drastic, and flap position 2. Actually, at that point, the second notch of flaps, the ailerons don't participate, because it's too much, it's too extreme. And you do want to have aileron. Of course, the flaps also move. When you move the ailerons now, because you're trying to maneuver still. So you want to have some level of flaps. But
flap position 1.
as you can see, both things move up and down. Everything participates, but so you have a lot of maneuverability, and essentially you're able to to literally put the nose at 40 degrees or whatever, and just come straight down very slow, because in full flaps, the second notch of flaps. The first notch of flaps is nice when you are high and you want to just lose altitude and come in, or you want to kind of gauge if you have a little bit of wind too, or you want to just gauge the how you're coming in for a landing, and then, assuming you're doing spot landing or something like that. And then when you're ready to commit to a spot, then you put your second notch and and land. Now, again, this radio is fantastic because you can control everything. The way it talks to you, what it shows, the buttons you use, how you use them, and in a very, very, very interactive and very easy to handle way. So, but basically, those are the controls. I just wanted to give a quick preview of how I fly this plane. I still have a lot of glider guys don't use this for throttle, but they use more of this for flaps sometimes. I use it still for throttle. I'm kind of used to the old way, and I can manage the flaps with just notches rather than a fully functional, or what do you call it, full movement flap that responds to how you push a button here. But anyway, so that's the Radio Master for this particular glider, and again to look at well, I could probably show, if I turn this off, I can show some more stuff on the radio. But for now, at least that's the point that I wanted to get across. All right, hopefully this helps.